Hello everyone, and welcome to the finale of What If the Constructicons were in Transformers Prime. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Start off where we left off in the last part, where Optimus and Team Prime have fully restored and revived Cybertron. And Optimus Prime makes a speech to his fellow Autobots. Optimus basically says that he's proud of how far they have come, and even reviving and restoring their home world. But he says this would not be possible if it were not for the valiant efforts of our absent comrades, Bulkhead and Cliffjumper, who made this possible with their sacrifices. But on this day, we gather to give a thanks to our newest member, Smokescreen, for his valiant effort in keeping the final Omega Key away from Decepticon hands. Smokescreen says, "It's an honor to be here, sir, especially with you." Wheeljack then says, "Not to mention, you ended Megatron's spark. It's thanks to you we're where we are now. I did what I felt was right. I couldn't have allowed Megatron to murder another one of our own brethren, and to restore Cybertron and poison the minds of Cybertronians to be born."
Ratchet then says, "What do we do now, Optimus? We've restored Cybertron, but what's next?"
Optimus then says, "We must find the AllSpark." Then he explains the whole story, just like in canon. Not too long after, they see a ship. All the Autobots take out their weapons and aim, because they don't know if this is friend or foe. A figure then walks out of the ship. That is where Optimus tells his fellow Autobots to pull down their weapons, because it is none other than Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus then greets his fellow Autobots. And obviously Ultra Magnus says, "You restored our home planet?" Optimus then says, "Yes, you've missed a lot, old friend." Optimus then says, "We will get to more reunion later. I will head into space with Wheeljack to search for the AllSpark. Ultra Magnus, you will take Smokescreen, Wedge, Heavyload, Hightower, Holler, and Grid, and search for Shockwave and the Constructicons and bring them in. RC, Bumblebee, Ratchet, you will go to Darkmount and retrieve a map of Shockwave's labs. Autobots, transform and roll out." We now cut back to Starscream and Unicron. Starscream says, "Who in the AllSpark are you?" He then introduces himself as Unicron. Starscream then thinks about it. "Unicron? The Chaos Bringer? But why is it that you summoned me?" Unicron then says, "You were a carrier of Dark Energon, were you not?" Starscream then says, "Yes, to restore Skyquake from the dead." "Yes, you were a carrier for Dark Energon, were you not? Even for a blip second." Yes. But why is it that you have summoned me here, Unicron?" "I have summoned you here because I need you. Your corpse." "What exactly for?" "The foolish Prime and Megatron vanquished me, or so they thought. I was only put dormant, but I now awaken because I sensed the awakening of my ancient rival from across the cosmos." Starscream then puts it all together. "Someone must have restored Cybertron. But who?" Unicron then says, "I do not care about that question. But in order to stop them, my anti-spark requires a vessel. So, I will live again? Only to serve me. Your husk will simply be an instrument of my will." Starscream then screams in pain as he is transformed into a new form. He then transforms, flying into space towards Cybertron. Ultra Magnus, Smokescreen, and the build team are patrolling through Kaon's city streets, with Smokescreen telling the build team, "So happy to see Cybertron back to life." The build team then says, "Well, good for you. We've never seen it like this. We weren't built on Cybertron, if you noticed." That's when Smokescreen says, One day you'll learn the Cybertron that we all once knew. Ultra Magnus then says, stay on target, soldiers. They hear movement in a building, transforming, and looking in to see the Constructicons. Ultra Magnus immediately recognizes the Constructicons. The Constructicons then notice all the Autobots.
Ultra Magnus. We haven't seen you since the fall of Cybertron.
Save that for another time, Constructicons. By order of Optimus Prime, you are hereby under arrest. A screech is then heard, and it's none other than the Predacon. The Predacon then instantly attacks the Autobots, knowing that they're the enemy, with the build team instantly combining in the landfill to engage the Predacon, but the Constructicons combine into Devastator to engage landfill. Ultra Magnus and Smokescreen open fire on the Predacon, with the Predacon breathing fire directly at Ultra Magnus and Smokescreen, but Smokescreen used the phase shifter holding Ultra Magnus's hand, and the phase shifter managed to phase all of the fire breath through them, not affecting them at all. And they then open fire back on the Predacon. We now cut with Landfill and Devastator fighting. Devastator's like, prepare to perish, Autobot. With Landfill responding with, look, Optimus wants to revive our planet and restore life to finally flow on Cybertron again. You've seen it before. We haven't. Maybe we could work together. After all, we are kind of alike. We're like brothers, basically. Devastator then halts and thinks for a moment. Devastator reverts back into the Constructicons. So does Landfill, reverting back to the build team. The Constructicons then look at each other and then look at the build team. Scrapper then says, you're right. Why are we still fighting for a cause that's already dead? Megatron fell. So, you know what? We're in. Together, they then open fire on the Predacon, but then overcomes we hear Shockwave say, return my Predacon. The Predacon then leaves. Ultra Magnus then looks at the Constructicons. Why would you help us? Then Scrapper explains the whole story, that they don't want to keep fighting for a cause that is dead, and plus, they owe Optimus for sparing their life many times. Ultra Magnus does not believe this, but then he looks at the build team, and they could vouch for their word. So, he then says, take us to Shockwave's lab. Let's finish this. Meanwhile, at Darkmount, Ultra Magnus had just contacted the Autobots to meet at Shockwave's lab because the Constructicons had just joined them. So, the others really have no need to be there anymore. But that's when they see something flying in. They then look closely. RC's eyes then widen. No, it can't be. He's dead. Unicron Starscream then reverts to robot mode. Ratchet then says, I thought you witnessed him die. And RC's like, so did I. How are you alive? And then Unicron then says, Starscream cannot answer you at this moment. Though I assure you with utmost authority that he owes his own new lease on life to me, Unicron, and I will not be so easy to deliver into oblivion. The same thing happens. They escape Unicron Starscream, and they eventually reach the smelting pit with the same thing happening, but Ratchet activates a ground bridge using a remote control, just like how Starscream did in canon when he was solo in the Harbinger. Unicron Starscream then thinks to himself, I am weak. For this planet's destruction, I must acquire a more greater instrument of destruction. We now go to Optimus and Wheeljack looking for the AllSpark. This would be a little harder for Optimus traversing through the asteroid belt, but I'd say he jumps from asteroid to asteroid instead of using a jetpack, and eventually does find the AllSpark. The storm surge still comes in, and he makes it back to Wheeljack's ship on time as well. And soon enough, they're on their way back to Cybertron. So we now cut to Starscream, Unicron, and the Predacons encounter. This whole fight goes pretty much just like in canon, with one change. The Predacon does not transform. He has not discovered that yet. And then the same thing happens where Unicron beats up Predaking and then looks into his brain and sees the vision of all those Predacon fossils. Because I'd say the Predacon would find them at some point and, have some sort of guardianship and stuff over this graveyard. Meanwhile, at Shockwave's lab, the Autobots and the Constructicons surround Shockwave and overwhelm him. And yeah, because of the sheer amount of people against him, Shockwave does submit. And soon is when the Predacon walks in, but he seems injured, and Shockwave then goes up to it. My creation, what is the trouble? And I think somehow, someway, Shockwave does understand the Predacon. The Predacon then prepares to attack the Autobots, but that's when his Shockwave is like, no, we may need all the allies we could spare. And then, Shockwave, the Predacon, Ultra Magnus, Smokescreen, the Build Team, and the Constructicons all join forces and head to the Predacon graveyard, with Ratchet, Bumblebee, and RC soon meeting there. We now cut to the Predacon graveyard. Unicron Starscream raises the undead Terracon army, then orders them to head to the core and rain terror among this planet and destroy Primus. All these characters then meet up at the core of Cybertron to guard it and to not let anything in. And soon enough, Unicron arrives. The Predacon then charges forward, breathing fire just like how him, Skylynx, and Darksteel did in canon, but with no Skylynx or Darksteel present. The Predacons, just like in canon, suck Predaking along with them into the core of Cybertron. Smokescreen then looks down at the car. So really? This is how it ends? And Ultra Magnus is like, we're not losing our planet. Not without stopping Unicron. Unicron is then rushed by everybody all at once. Unicron Starscream then takes them all down. The Build Team then combine and rush at Unicron Starscream, but Unicron Starscream tosses them aside with a Dark Energon blast. The Constructicon ship then comes flying in, opening fire on Unicron, and it's none other than Dreadwing and Knockout. But their saving is led short when Unicron blasts a Dark Energon beam at the ship, making it crash down. The Constructicons then run towards their damaged ship, hoping to recover Dreadwing and Knockout. They both survive, but they're critically damaged. The Constructicons then instantly start repairing them. Wheeljack's ship then instantly flies into view, and everybody gets happy. Optimus then jumps out, but just like in canon, Unicron hits down Wheeljack's ship. And just like in canon, Wheeljack crashes down and hurts himself. Now I'd say the Build Team does instantly rush to their side because Wheeljack in this world is kind of like a mentor to them. Also Bulkhead, but he's sadly no longer around. Optimus and Unicron start fighting each other. The Build Team are checking up on Wheeljack. That's when the Constructicons walk towards them. Wheeljack instantly aims one of his guns out at them, but the Build Team is like, wait, maybe they could help. The Constructicons are like, yes. And they all look at each other. And then I'd say it all goes something like this.
Okay, let's show them what we're built for. Look, guys, if we don't make it, it's been great being part of the team.
Hey, we're not scrap iron yet, so don't get drippy. Now, let's transform!
Now we cut back to Unicron and Optimus, where Unicron has Optimus pinned down to the floor, like, give me the AllSpark, and I will spare your life, Prime. That is when the Constructicons shoot at Unicron. Unicron then fires a Dark Energon beam back at them, with Devastator literally grabbing Unicron and then throwing him around like how Hulk did the Loki in Avengers 2012. But that's when Unicron's eyes glow dead-ass purple and unleashes a beam, literally heat vision, like pushing back Devastator and literally knocking him down. Unicron senses AllSpark energy coming from the Constructicons. Then he looks and sees the capsule of the AllSpark inside of one of the Constructicons' vehicle mold's door. And just like in canon, he yanks it out and says, "I shall devour your AllSpark whole." And then in canon, Unicron's energy gets sucked out of the body into the AllSpark capsule, trapping Unicron. The Constructicons then discombine, with the build team crowding up around them and helping them up and being like, "Nice job." And then they look to the side. Starscream then says, "Thank you very much, Constructicons, for freeing me. Now I have my opportunity to restore and revive Cybertron under my name, Lord Starscream." With the Constructicons then looking at each other, then saying, "Hey, Shockwave, here's your chance to get your revenge on Starscream for abandoning you on Cybertron." Starscream then looks to Shockwave, and Shockwave looks at Starscream. But that's when the Predacon comes out of nowhere, pins Starscream to the ground, and Shockwave says, "Take him to my laboratory." We then end that part off with them leaving, and Starscream screaming, "No! Please, no!" We now cut to not too long after the whole event's played out, where Optimus walks from Dreadwing and Knockout to the Constructicons. "I would also like to thank you all for your bravery in saving Cybertron." The Constructicons then say, "Hey Prime, anything for you. After all, you've saved our lives more than we could count. We owe you. We owe Cybertron." And Optimus then says, "I would like to offer you all a spot on my Autobot team and to hand over the AllSpark." Yeah, about that. They didn't explain to Optimus that they put the AllSpark in their chests, each portioned, and in Devastator form, it's really strong. And there's only one option to release the AllSpark energy. Optimus then says, "I see, but thank you, Constructicons." The Constructicons then say, "No, thank you for showing us the light." They then combine into Devastator. They march towards the edge. They take one last look at all the Autobots. And they look at the build team. "Carry on our legacy." And the build team then say, "Will do." They then go down, heading into the core of Cybertron. Life returns to Cybertron. And that is the story of what if the Constructicons were in Transformers Prime. I thank you for all the love of your guys' support in this what if, and I'll see you guys in the next one.